Welcome back to Touring Townsends. We're Dave and Jill, and we took early retirement so that we could travel more in our motorhome in the UK and abroad. Hi guys, in this week's video I want to talk through the planning for our trip to France, which you'll be able to start watching from next week. Since we took early retirement, we like to do quite long trips, but this particular trip is only going to be 2 weeks long, so I want to explain why. Even though it's only 2 weeks, we opted to go to France, so I'm going to give you our reasons for that as well. Then I'll talk through how we chose the crossing, where we stayed, and how we planned the trip. So here goes. So the trip is only going to be 2 weeks long, and that's because we have a very important appointment that we have to be back for. You may have noticed over the last few months' videos that Dave has quite a bad limp, and he has been struggling more and more to walk recently. This is due to arthritis in his ankle, and we've been waiting for a date for surgery. It's one reason why we haven't been able to make any long-term plans for this year, because we wanted to wait and see when the surgery would be. So we finally got a date for mid-February. So that enabled us to go to Scotland for a month in January. We came back for the pre-op, and I delivered him to the hospital on the required date, only to find out that the surgeon was off sick, so it was cancelled. This then left us with a gap until the next surgery date, hence our 2-week trip to France. The next thing I wanted to talk about was why France, and the reason for that is fairly simple. Firstly, this time of year in the UK, it's quite difficult to find places to stay, particularly for a van of our size on hard standing. Most campsites don't open until the end of March at the earliest, and there aren't that many other options for us. Whereas in France, we've got the whole air system to play with. I'm going to talk a bit more about the airs later. The second reason was back to Dave. He's having difficulty walking, and that's got worse and worse recently. So by going to France, we'll be able to access the cycle lanes, which are much more abundant there, and it's much easier to get about on a bike, which he's able to do with a lot less pain than walking. So you'll see in next week's video that we opted to cross with Brittany ferries, and we took the Portsmouth to Caen day crossing, leaving mid-afternoon and landing at 10 o'clock at night. We quite often do the DFDS New Haven to Dieppe crossing, but the reason we chose Brittany ferries this time, it's more expensive, but last summer we got a voucher from Brittany ferries when we had to cancel and rearrange our ferry due to our motorhome breaking down. We'd booked a ferry from Spain to get back home, so very expensive crossing, and we had to rearrange it to leave from Brittany instead. So they gave us a voucher for the difference, so we used that to book this crossing. We've used Brittany ferries many times in the past. When we first started motorhoming, we preferred the Eurotunnel. It's so much quicker. You arrive, you get on the train, you get off the other side, and we used to have breakfast on board or lunch on board while we were on the Eurotunnel in the van, obviously, so we had everything we needed. But the prices have gone up so much in the last few years that we haven't used the Eurotunnel for a while. Brittany ferries is expensive, but it does get you that bit further south if you do the crossings into Brittany. And that's what we did this time. Well, not Brittany, Normandy, but it got us a start because we wanted to head to Brittany for our 2-week trip. So we decided to head to Brittany on this trip because we love it. It's a beautiful area, and we've been there 2 or 3 times now, but we know there's still many bits that we haven't seen, so that made it a good choice. And there's lots of airs there where we can stay. So how do we plan the trip once we land? Well, we're landing at 10 o'clock at night, so we need to find somewhere fairly close to the ferry port, but not noisy. There is an air right next to the ferry port in Caen, but it will be very noisy with all the ships coming and going. There's some very early arrivals, so we didn't want to stay there. So we chose an air that we used last year when we were stuck in Normandy for a while after our van broke down. and we stayed at Hermanville-sur-Mer. So this brings me to talk about airs. This air in Hermanville-sur-Mer is a camping car park air. And this is one of the type of airs that you can use in France, although they are also spreading into other European countries as well. Camping car park is a company, and they take over airs, quite often community-owned airs that the community no longer can afford to run, and they will put in electric hookups usually. They often mark out the pitches, so it's much easier to see where you should park, and they'll put services in if they're not there already. So you'll get your water, your waste, and your chemical waste. And all of this is included in the price, and they have a really good app that you can use. And this is one reason we chose Hermanville-sur-Mer, because it meant that we could go on the app when we got off the ferry, and on there it will tell you how many spaces are left on the air. And we had a couple of backup options if it was full. With it being close to the ferry port, it is a popular air. So when you get to the air, you need a card. Camping car park have a card. Now this is our card, and I saw somebody's recently and it looked completely different. Ours is very old. We've had it quite a long time. If you don't have the card, then there's a machine at the air where you can buy a card, and I think it's still €5. It's always been €5 to buy. Once you've got the card, you then charge it up with euros. You can do that at the machine, or once you've created and linked your account, you can do it on the app. So we usually do it on the way to an air. If we think we're going to get in, we'll put money on the card to cover the cost of staying there. When you get to the air, you show your card to the machine at the barrier and it lets you in. When you leave, you show your card again and it will deduct the cost of the stay, however long it's been. The app will tell you how much it's going to be, and it gives a running cost of that particular stay, so you can check whether you've gone into a second day, things like that. It's a really good app and we find it very useful. So we're going to try and get into the camping car park air. The other choices, one of our backups, is an air park air. Now this company came on around after camping car park, and they seem to have modelled themselves very similarly. The only difference being they don't currently have an app, but they do have a website. So Air Park, you can go on their website and you can check again how many spaces are available on the air. It'll tell you how much the air costs and give you a bit of information about what services they supply. Both of these companies include Wi-Fi. Generally, it's not great. Occasionally, if you're parked close to the router, you might get a decent signal, but we don't tend to use the Wi-Fi very often. We certainly don't rely on having it. But I should probably explain what I mean by an air, in case you haven't used them before. Airs are motorhome and campervan specific parking areas. Sometimes they're barriered, but not always. Sometimes it's exclusively for motorhomes and campervans. Sometimes it's just marked bays in a car park for all vehicles. So it varies a lot. Sometimes it's free, sometimes there's a small fee, sometimes they can be quite expensive, particularly if they're by the coast in a good location. The services they provide will vary. Sometimes you'll get wastewater only, sometimes you'll get wastewater, chemical waste, and fresh drinking water. It all depends on the particular air and who's running it. Now, unlike all the other airs, camping car park and air park allow reservations. With camping car park, you have to pay a fee to be allowed to do this. I think it's called the pack privilege, and you pay an annual fee and then you can pre-book your space. Now, we've never done this because we've always been a bit wary of reports that people turn up with a booking and somebody has parked across 2 spaces, or they've put a trailer in a space. So although it's showing as a space is available, there isn't actually one there. And once you've paid, you don't get your money back. With Air Park, you don't have to pay any extra to reserve a space. But again, you've got the same problem If people don't park considerately, then you might not actually get into that space. So we don't use these facilities at the moment, but I know a lot of people do, especially in the summer. So with there being lots and lots of different types of airs, how do we find them? When we're planning a trip, we don't tend to plan very far in advance. So for the French trip, we've planned that we're going to stay in Hermenville-sur-Mer, hopefully, just outside the ferry port. And then we're going to drive to Vannes, where we know that there's an air there. We've used it before, and it's a camping car park air, so we can check whether there's space available when we get there. Outside of that, we haven't really planned anything else. We will be doing it on the trip as we go. So we start off usually by looking at search for sites. I like search for sites because there's lots of different icons for different things. So for example, if you want to find an air, you look for a motorhome picture. Now it might be a dark blue or a light blue on the map. Dark blue usually means that there's services of some sort. Light blue means there isn't. And they also have a green motorhome, which is a camping car park airs. So that's quite handy. They don't currently have a colour for air park, but as air park continues to grow, I'm sure they will. So we look on the map where we want to go, and then we have a look at the individual airs. We do pay the subscription for Search for Sites because this gives you access to several reviews. On the free subscription, you can still look on the map, and I think you get 3 reviews for free. We like to look back through the reviews. One reason I like Search for Sites is you get the size of the motorhome of the people who've stayed there. So it gives us an idea if people with motorhomes as big as ours are using that particular air. And then hopefully, if there's any difficulties with access, people will comment on it. The downside of Search for Sites is it can be a bit out of date. Sometimes there might not have been a review for 6 months or a year or even longer. So if I find somewhere that I think looks worth a go, I will then go on Park for Night and see if it's on Park for Night as well. Reviews on Park for Night tend to be up to date, and people will comment on whether something is closed, whether in winter, for example, the water is sometimes turned off if it's in an area where it might freeze. So that's something to be aware of and plan for. So people will comment on that in their reviews, which is really useful. Then Dave normally goes on to Google Maps and sees if he can find the air on Google Maps and check the access and have a look at what Google Maps shows about the area. Is there a footpath to walk into town? That sort of thing. So we use a number of different resources before we choose an air. And the most important thing is always have a backup. So we'll be traveling around Brittany, hopefully, for 2 weeks. We will be vlogging as we go, as we do on these trips, and you'll be able to watch part 1 next week. I hope we'll see you then. Any questions, do let me know in the comments. We're happy to answer them. And please, if you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us to grow. Bye for now.